Could the Texans have tried to trade for George Kittle? Let's follow the clues. Tank Dell has a message for you, the roles of the rookies, and a lot to get into. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localized. Every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the post.
It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content. I am Landry Locker. Little late start today. Had to watch the Rockets game. The Rockets get the dub, and there will be a Game 7 in town on Sunday. I might try to make it out to this one, and that should be fun to watch. So congrats to the Rockets. But we're here to talk Texans. Let's talk about the Texans. Tank Dell has a message for you. Could Nick Caserio have tried to trade for one of the best tight ends in the league? And also the ideal roles, the optimal roles of Texans rookies. Happy Friday to all. Let's start with the Tank Dell message. Tank Dell has a message. He says he will be back. If you're doubting that Tank Dell will be back, he says that he will be back. Here was the message on Twitter. He said, delayed, but not denied. Say what you want. I'll be back. I don't think that's next season, but I do think I try not to. I mean, whenever someone tweets something as an athlete, especially when you're a digital beat guy and you react to this stuff, because in the world we live in, it is news, but I also think you give players their space. I don't follow any of the players on social media. But Tank Dell's going through a very emotional time right now. And Tank Dell's a young guy. And a lot of times when you're going through an emotional time, you'll put out a message every once in a while, motivational message. We see it all the time. We see it with kids that are Tank Dell's age doing stuff like this. And I'm not sitting here saying to hike your leg on the possibility of Tank Dell playing football again. I'm just saying, don't make a lot of this in what he's saying. A lot of times it's just motivation. Maybe he's seeing that guys are being drafted and that people are kind of questioning what he's going to be or what he's going to do. I wouldn't make too much of this, but it does at least appear, and you always got to take it with a grain of salt on how stuff appears on social media. It does just at least appear, as DeMeco Ryans has said all 75 times that he's been asked about it, that Tank Dell appears to be in good spirits. So good for Tank Dell, but I wouldn't read too much into that, and I wouldn't be preparing to see Tank Dell on the field. I bet DeMeco Ryans gets asked about Tank Dell at the golf tournament on Monday, which I'll be at. I'll talk to DeMeco, maybe Hannah and Cal. I don't know about that. And we'll hear definitely what DeMeco has to say about him. I'm sure that will be a question for sure. And I don't know why Tank Dell is not is being questioned, but yeah, who knows? Maybe he's not. Maybe he just wants to let you know that he's going to be fine and he'll figure some stuff out. I thought about this and I put this out, and it's just kind of a localized look and kind of incorporating the Rockets. And I think maybe the Texans can kind of relate to this too. You can do everything right as an organization. And sometimes when it comes to getting that elite piece, it's as simple as luck. It's as simple as luck. Lucking into that elite piece. Earlier today, I was watching NFL Network. By the way, Good Morning Football. I don't know if y'all have watched Good Morning Football in a while, but Good Morning Football is a really good show to have on in the background. It is a really good vibe. It's not hot takey. They kind of fill you in on what's going on in the league. There's some loose stuff. Kyle Brandt does a great job. I miss Peter Schwager, but he's with ESPN now. Manti Te'o actually does really well. Colleen does an excellent job, and they've been having like rotating guests since he left. But I've had it where in the morning when I'm getting stuff done, I'll have it on in the background. It's much better than having Stephen A. Smith scream at you and have whatever the hell they're trying to do with their basketball coverage going on ESPN, and the football too has kind of become a little bit disingenuous as well. But I strongly recommend Good Morning Football. And that wasn't the point of bringing this up, but I had NFL Network on because I was watching Good Morning Football, and I saw the Tom Brady 6 documentary where Tom Brady basically goes through the 6 guys that were drafted ahead of him at the quarterback position, and New England ended up drafting him. And let's just be honest, that's luck. I know that Bill Belichick can say he pounded the table, but that's luck. Drew Bledsoe gets hurt. Tom Brady goes in. That's luck. And they ended up having the greatest athlete maybe of all time, definitely the greatest football player of all time. Same thing with Peyton Manning. You saw Peyton Manning. The Colts had the number 1 pick, and they lucked into Peyton Manning. Basketball, it happens all the time. Hell, you could say the Texans. You could say the Texans lucked into being bad at the right time. Some teams aren't bad at the right time, and you have the number 1, number 2 pick in a draft where there's no quarterback. Like the team right behind the Titans this year, in the draft, the Browns. You don't think the Browns would love to have a franchise quarterback number 2? Unfortunately, they hit rock bottom the wrong year. They didn't have C.J. Stroud as the number 2 pick. They didn't have the chance to take Drake May or Jaden Daniels last year. All they had was Shedeur Sanders, and they ended up getting him in the 5th round, but he definitely didn't warrant being selected in the 2nd round. So sometimes you just luck into things. And I'm watching this Rockets team, and I know there's a snowball effect, and they wouldn't have Amen Thompson, and the team wouldn't look the exact same. But I'm watching this team scrap. I'm watching what this organization has done and the team that they've put together, the coach that they hired, the free agents that they've signed to overlook these guys, the core pieces and all that. And this is a great series. They could end up winning it, but I don't think anyone's going to pick the Rockets to win a championship. And the reason is they don't have that elite piece. But if the ping pong balls would have gone their way, and let's say they had Paulo Banchero instead of Jabari Smith, when they could have had the number 1 pick, they ended up having the number 3 pick. Or they could have had Cade Cunningham instead of Jalen Green, 2 guys whose teams came up short. They didn't have the supporting cast that the Rockets have. But if they had either one of those guys instead of the other 2, yeah, you can say they might not have Amen Thompson, but there's not too many teams beating them. So I say all that to just say, a lot of times you can do everything the right way as an organization, but if you don't get somewhat lucky when it comes to getting that elite piece, you can be out of luck. And that's what I thought about as I was watching the Rockets. So we'll see what they do, but no one's going to pick them to win a championship. And that's just kind of where they're at. Shout out to HDAV Traveler, aka Austin Jack, on the soup. You ain't never hate. Swarm. Evening, Landry and friends. Evening to you, my friend. But that's just a little bit of localized thought. So now I want to get into this. And there was a report from someone that we've labeled the Texans Insider, the top national Texans Insider. And we haven't labeled it, but she's kind of earned it. Diana Rossini has established herself as the top Texans national insider. It's happened in the last 18 months, 2 years or so. But when it comes to national news, there's really not a close second. Diana Rossini's been all over it. And she breaks as many stories as everyone, as anyone. And on this channel and on SNL with myself and Cody Stutz, we acknowledge that Diana Rossini, when it comes to Texans news, stories, all that, she's pretty much all over it. Before the draft, Diana Rossini said that the Texans were trying to move up. And we automatically believed it because of what she's established herself as. She also said something else that I thought was interesting. And Nick Caserio actually confirmed that they had agreed to a couple of trades. But this was what Diana Rossini said with Chase Daniel on her athletic show, Scoop City, about a potential trade involving 49ers tight end George Kittle. Let's hear what Diana said.
I know there was a team that had a conversation with the 49ers the night before the draft about a possible trade for Kittle, a second rounder they were looking to get in return.
Oh, what?
They turned it down. The 49ers decided to keep him and really move this situation forward by getting a deal done. But there was a little interest there, some poking around.
Why didn't they move him? The second round pick for a 32-year-old tight end, that seems like a really good return on investment, no?
I don't think the 49ers ever wanted to walk away from George Kittle either. I don't think George Kittle wanted to walk away from the 49ers. I think they've always wanted to be together. Everyone just wanted to feel like they were winning in the negotiation.
Could you imagine Kittle not a 49er? It doesn't make sense.
Okay, it doesn't make sense, but crazier things have happened. And this got me to thinking. So Diana Rossini has a couple of teams that she's extra connected to. We've established the fact that one of those teams is the Texans. And this is just complete speculation, just complete thought. But because she is who she is and because the Texans are who they are and we cover them, it just makes me wonder, what if the Texans tried to trade a second-round pick to get George Kittle, and what if they got him? Let's just kind of break this down, and let's kind of just look at the clues as to why this would make sense in a hypothetical world if the Texans were the team that tried to get George Kittle, and let's say they offered a second-round pick. All right, here's the potential clues. So Nick Caserio said after the draft that the Texans, they stopped kind of trying to trade up in the mid to late teens. It was kind of confusing because you didn't know what offensive lineman would warrant trading up that far. And I know there's been speculation that maybe it was a receiver, but you kind of wonder if they would have really been that desperate to trade up for some of these receivers that were on the board. We also know that Diana Rossini knows the Texans, so let's keep that in mind. What if the Texans, because Kelvin Banks was the one guy that we thought would make sense, he was gone before he didn't even last past the top 10. What if the Texans in this weak wide receiver draft with a offensive coordinator who acknowledges that he loves tight ends, what if they were trying to trade up for Colston Loveland and then maybe Tyler Warren, but that just basically got blown up because Loveland went earlier than expected and Tyler Warren ended up falling? What if the Texans were trying to trade up for a tight end and not one of these offensive linemen? Because Tyler Booker at 12, that might have been the best player on the Cowboys board, but trading up for a guard just seems a little bit kind of far-fetched. So what if the Texans were trying to trade up for a tight end? And what if the Texans were open to trading for George Kittle? Now, we've seen the Texans. Here's another clue. We've seen the Texans, when they have extra draft equity, show a willingness to trade for a veteran. They treat extra draft picks like they just got a bonus at work, and they go to the casino and blow the money. We see Nick Caserio do that all the time, sometimes in a matter of minutes. As soon as he gets that extra one, he's on his way to the casino. Last year with their extra draft pick, they traded for Stephon Diggs. They had an extra draft pick this year. It was a weak wide receiver group. What if they were trying to trade for George Kittle? D'Amico Ryans, he knows George Kittle. D'Amico Ryans is a guy who, I'm sure he likes what George Kittle brings to the table. And here's the other thing. George Kittle is the type of player where he, much like I talked about with Knoll today, he's a guy who can help the offensive line and he can help the pass game. He's one of the better receiving tight ends in the league, and he's one of the better blocking tight ends in the league, which can help an inexperienced offensive line. So he kind of helps both of your needs, and you still maintain your full draft equity because you have the extra picks. So I'm not sitting here saying that the Texans did try to trade for George Kittle. I'm just saying there are context clues to where if a team there's a lot of teams that you can cross off. Texans wouldn't be the most far-fetched, and based on who's saying it, and the fact that she knows everything about the Texans kind of makes you wonder. Now let's get into the next part of this conversation. What if the Texans did trade for George Kittle? How would you feel if they used one of their second-round picks to trade for George Kittle? So let's say they either end up not getting Higgins or they end up not getting Ursery. how does that make you feel? Let's say they get let's say they trade the Ursery second round pick and they come away from this draft with Higgins and Kittle. And maybe they go offensive line because they have Kittle. Who knows? How does that make you feel? I think it's intriguing. I do think Chase had a good point, courtesy of the athletic stream that Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel do, that, it is a 32-year-old tight end. I think there would actually be some pushback as to whether or not that made sense, and that's a smart way to use money. But Dalton Schultz is coming off the books after this year. That's $11 million. You're not gonna pay his guaranteed. So if you look at it as you're kind of filling in the spaces with what Dalton Schultz would be owed in year 3 of his contract, and we know that he's not playing for that salary after year 2. Maybe it's kind of a proactive move as well. It makes you good in the short term, and then it allows you to quote fall back on Kittle after Schultz leaves, which we know is going to happen, because this time next year, Dalton Schultz is probably going to be off the roster. We don't know what Cade Stover is going to develop into. We don't know what Brevin Jordan is going to develop into. So tight end could be a big need. If you eliminate that with George Kittle, even if it's a small window, the trade might have actually made sense. There's a little bit of pushback, but when you look ahead, you look at the moment, you look at the past actions, and you look at the person that's saying it, not too far-fetched to think that maybe the Texans were that team. What an interesting thing to think about. It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content. I am Landry Locker. Appreciate y'all for rolling through. Shout out to the Rockets for doing what they did and giving us a little bit of weekend entertainment. We got 2 Game 7s, so that'll be really, 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 really fun to see. Brandon says the numbers don't work with Kittle. What are you talking about? Yeah, you can make it work for sure with Kittle. The numbers, you can make the numbers work for sure. The numbers don't work. Have you seen the way that teams manipulate the cap? Happens quite often. But the top national insider said that the Kittle trade almost happened. Texans rookies, they will be in the building next week, and we will get our first look at these guys on the field. We'll get to hear what D'Amico has to say. Cody and I today on SNL, we had our draft of guys who we think will make the biggest impact. I'm convinced that Noel is the guy to watch in that area. I think Higgins could end up being the best player, but I think Noel is someone to keep an eye on. That they drafted him as the best player available. Talk to Caserio, and I want y'all to go back and check out the Noel video. I broke this down how on this stream and on SNL, we were all over the Noel selection, where we talked about the multiple slot receivers with Kirk. We talked about the Iowa State connection, and then they ended up making the pick. But I think that the best way to combat a talent-limited offensive line can be providing your quarterback with ways to get rid of the ball quickly. And one of the best ways to get rid of the ball quickly is having a really good slot receiver or multiple slot receivers or multiple options for CJ Stroud. And I think that Noel provides that. Now, how are they going to use him and Kirk? You heard Caserio kind of break it down when I asked him about it before the draft. I think Noel is a guy to watch, and the comparisons that you hear are, you hear comparisons about comparisons with Christian Kirk, and then Steve and Sam on the 33rd team. They mentioned that they think of him as Ladd McConkey, which is pretty damn crazy. We saw what Ladd McConkey did last year. So you see rookies go in out of the slot and make big impacts. I don't know that there's like some sort of connection, because it's not always guys in the slot that make the big impact. But if you just look at the last few years, wide receivers that have had like the biggest immediate impact, Puka Nacua 2 years ago, He broke the record for most receptions in a season by a rookie receiver. Or he was damn near close to it. I don't remember whether he actually did, but he was damn near close to it. Help me out on that in the chat. And then you also had last year, you had Ladd McConkey, who was, Brian Thomas was probably the guy that got the most buzz, but Ladd McConkey was, he was as good as it got for a rookie receiver in the slot since Puka the year before. So you've seen recently the impact that slot guys can have, and those are two different type of dudes. You're talking about a guy who played at Georgia, and you're talking about a guy who played at BYU and was probably a little bit underutilized. Noel's kind of like in the middle of that. And I don't know if there's like some sort of method to it. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easier for slot receivers to transition to the NFL, but it can definitely be a good option for a quarterback. And let's just be honest. When Cooper Kupp was out, Nakua was kind of the only guy that the Rams had that was kind of an elite talent at wide receiver. And McConkey was definitely the only prime receiving option that they had last year with the Chargers. The field might be even more open for a guy like Noel. And I'm not sitting here saying that the Texans wide receiving group is elite by any stretch of the imagination, but you do have Nico Collins, who is on the fringe of being an elite guy. You have Christian Kirk, who does what he does, and then you have Higgins, and you have CJ Stroud. So I think Noel could be the guy that has the best impact. Am I drafting him on my fantasy team or anything like that? No, probably not. But I think Noel, if you're talking about the best impact, you can keep an eye on him as primarily the right guy. RK on the chat asks, is there any tight end that went undrafted yet that we could bring in? I think Luke Lachey is a good player out of Iowa. I'm actually intrigued to see what he does. He was right up there with Sam Laporta when they were at Iowa, like as far as being a prospect. He's big as hell, and he's probably already at worst your second best blocking tight end, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what he looks like and how he lines up with the other guys. There's an interesting situation in the tight end room where you do have Brevin Jordan. You're not overly committed to Brevin Jordan. He's not 100% locked to make the team. Cade Stover, he's going to be on the team, and it'll be interesting to see what he looks like this year. And then Dalton Schultz, you basically stuck with him this year, and he's primarily a receiving guy. So it'll be interesting to see what Lachey looks like when it comes to blocking, and I'm actually kind of intrigued by him. I don't know that they really need another tight end. They did bring in the massive human being from Texas Tech that's like 6'9". And I mean, we'll see what he looks like on the field. That's going to be crazy to see just how much of a massive human being this guy is. But I don't know whether or not he's going to be some sort of impact guy. That's kind of a project type of thing to keep an eye on. But I do think Noel will be that dude. And be sure to check out the Noel video posted earlier today. Basically takes us through the entire process. We hear from him. And we kind of revisit what I said with Caserio, and we kind of make this case as well. Just a nice, quick watch if you want to check that out. But next week we got rookie mini camp. We'll hear from D'Amico Ryans, and we'll get a little bit of a grasp of things. Hugh Stone says Noel looks like a running back in the open field in his Iowa State highlights. He's fast as hell, man. I mean, he's a 4.3 guy. Like normally when you're talking about slot guys, a lot of times you're sitting there saying, okay, well, he's slow, blah, 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 like with Restrepo and, the other guys that we mentioned. The Texans slot guys, the two guys that they got in the slot are fast. Like they're not your typical slots. And that's kind of what McConkey is. And that's probably part of the reason why Steve and Sam compare Noel to McConkey, because McConkey was fast as hell too. He was a 4.3 guy right there at 4.3. And that's what Noel is. Big dude. Very, very fast, very, very athletic. And they drafted him for a reason. They thought he was the best player available. That wasn't a need. And I know Caserio will say, well, we don't draft for need. Well, sometimes you do. I mean, sometimes you do. And up to that point, the two biggest needs, and this is just this might just be 100% coincidence for Nick Caserio. The two biggest needs were offensive line and wide receiver. And before you took Noel, what did they take? Took a receiver, and then they took offensive line. So then there was a choice, and they chose a guy that some would say is only a slot. Caserio would say that there's multiple slots, and the way that guys line up are there. But don't sleep on him at all. Don't sleep on him. Front runner in the chat. Nobody knows what the Texans will be. It's all up in the air until we see the product on the field. Coaching and bodies will play a big part of everything moving forward. That is the most Captain Obvious thing that I've seen. Shout out to Captain Obvious in the chat. That is a fact right there. That is very, very true. Coaching and players will play a big part of everything moving forward, and nobody knows until we see it on the field. That is very insightful there, mi amigo. Appreciate you for rolling through, though. Hey, Zeus, is there any free agents you would target? I think you need to keep an eye on running backs. J.K. Dobbins is a guy that keeps getting mentioned. And D tackles. D tackles, they probably would like some more bodies. I would also keep an eye on maybe if guys have the equivalent of John Mechie on their roster with areas of need that the Texans have. I think you should perhaps keep an eye on them. The Rhino says, LOL, yep, that's football. That's a fact, man. Players and coaches will decide. Andrew says, out of Hutch, Mechie, and Wayne, who's the odd man out? Maybe all three. I think Hutch is in. There's been a lot of praise from old Hutch. Hutch is in year 3. But there's been a lot of praise from Caserio. I don't know how I see no path towards Mechie making the team. I could see Wayne being on the practice squad. I think someone would claim Mechie if he were cut or anything like that. Someone would kick the tires on John Mechie, and maybe he finds a situation where it clicks, it gels, or whatever. I mean, maybe he figures some stuff out. But right now, there's really just I don't see a path towards John Mechie being on the team, and I could see Wayne being on the practice field or on the practice squad or something like that back in depth. He needs to get some cleats or something like that. He's kind of sliding all over the place in Kansas City. Not the first time. We ain't got to bring that up, but the second time. Check that out. A Mixon Dobbins backfield would be awesome. I don't know if it'd be awesome, but it wouldn't be terrible. Dobbins is kind of a local guy. I was actually kind of pounding the table for Dobbins or Jonathan Taylor in 2020 in the second round. They ended up going with Ross Blacklock. But you know me, I'm always pushing for the running back. But yeah, I think you can do a lot worse than J.K. Dobbins. Maybe he can come in here and be like a better version of what Cam Akers was last year. And then you factor in potentially the third down back. I think you could do all right with that. 100,000% could be well with that. Appreciate everyone for coming through. This one's a little shorter due to the Rockets. We'll put some content out during the weekend. We'll keep it rolling. This has been an awesome week. The draft is over, but the content has not slowed down with myself and Cody Stutes. Check out the Knoll video. Once again, let me know what your thoughts would be if the Texans did trade for George Kittle. And always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Have a good weekend, everybody. We will talk soon, and we are all in this together.
We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localized every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not too. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube. We got taste for days, opinions to give, we got takeaways.